I'm happy to be able to introduce to us a very special guest, Dr. Jessica Lautz, Vice President of Demographics and Behavioral Insights at the National Association of Realtors. So give a good, big, warm, wonderful round of applause. Thank you very much, Dr. Lautz, for being here with us today. Take it away.
I want to say a special thank you to Susie, who actually serves on the NAR Research Committee and has been really a wonderful contributor, actually looking at a pandemic changes report that is going to be coming soon and what business opportunities that realtors have seen in the last 2 years, what they're embracing, and what's here to stay. So really appreciate all of her contributions on the committee. It is a really interesting time. I will say, last night I actually tested positive for COVID for the first time, so here we are. We're gonna have lots of liquids next to me. I think we're gonna be good to go, but I set a timer for 36 minutes, and I'm leaving time for Q&A. So if I start, coughing during the middle of it, we'll do Q&A quicker. It's fine. We'll just roll with what we got here. This is a very interesting time in the real estate market. The introduction from your president is spot on. We are in an amazing transition time, and for any realtor who has been in the environment for a couple of years, you'll know that this is a very different market than the frenzied activity for the last 2 years. Dr. Lautz, the chief economist at NAR, is really talking about how we're in a housing recession right now, and that's different from a regular recession in that we have contracted sales activity right now in the housing market, but it doesn't mean that prices are going down. In fact, home prices continue to rise. In your local market, I'm seeing at least the data that I can pull, it's rising at a double-digit pace. That's much faster than the historical norm, on pace with what we're seeing nationally as well. A lot of that does have to do with migration trends. We saw a lot of people during the pandemic saying, the number one reason to move is to be close to friends and family. It's to be close to my support system and need them around me, either for childcare or for elder care, or just because we have a changing idea of what's important to us the last 2 years. But some of it is due to workplace trends as well. I'm going to show you some of the data that I'm seeing right now. I'm going to preface this all with, at 10 a.m. Eastern time, our new existing home sales are released. It's heavily embargoed, even by the SEC, so I can't share that data, but what I will say is that some of this data shows similar trends as I go through here, and some of this is longer historical data as well, so not an issue. The first thing I'm going to say is don't read the headlines. There's a lot of TikTok videos, there's a lot of reels out there, there's a lot of headlines that are essentially saying the sky is falling. It's not necessarily the case that the sky is falling, and when we look at this data, what I want to say is that we have to dig in a little deeper. We have to go beyond the headlines and actually look at the data. So I want to show you some historical trendline data that does show that we can't compare this to 2008. There's a lot of comparisons happening right now to the boom and the bust. We just have to go beyond those headlines and know that this is a very different housing paradigm that we're sitting in today than at that time period. So I want to jump into that. Right now, we still have incredibly short days on market. This does speak to the fact that while we were in a very strong seller's market in the last 2 years, we're still in a pretty strong seller's market. There's still a lot of demand in the real estate market today, and we know that the rise in interest rates is crunching affordability. So looking at home prices in your local area, between $350,000, $375,000, $400,000, that's going to push up the typical mortgage payment by $750 to $800 a month, and that's very, very difficult for a lot of consumers to meet that higher mortgage payment. That being said, there's still a lot of consumers who are in the pipeline, who are high-income borrowers, and they are able to actually meet that higher payment and may actually say that this is an opportunity for them because there is less demand in the market. That being said, when I look at this data and I see days on market, I think what's important here to note is that this trend line started in 2011, and at that time we had the typical days on market were nearly 100 days. That is a very, very different conversation to have with a seller during that time period than thinking about just 2 weeks right now, and to see that the vast majority of homes are selling under a month, more than 80% of homes, and we also know that 39% of sellers looking at the last month actually received more than their asking price. So you probably do have pretty happy sellers. That being said, is it the line out the door when home buyers can only see that home for about 15 minutes? No, it is a different environment for that, but we do know that it's still a seller's market. We also know that because of the affordability constraints, because of that rise in prices, coupled with the rise in interest rates, there's just fewer offers that we have right now. And so we have seen that the typical offers, when we look back in April, were 5.5 for every home that was listed, and that's a national average. Today it's 2.8, so it is lower, but I would still say that sellers are probably still happy to see multiple offers on their home, and perhaps they're not receiving, again, the 6 offers that we have seen, but they're still receiving multiple offers. We are also seeing that it's still a competitive market, and one of the ways that I can say that is that we're still seeing a strong number of buyers waiving the contingency, whether that's the home inspection or the appraisal contingency. I will say that when we see 27% of the market waiving the appraisal contingency, it's important to note that about a quarter of the market is paying all cash. So these home buyers don't need the appraisal contingency in their transaction at all. That would not be part of the equation. We still see it's a solid percent of the market who are paying all cash. We also do see that inspection waiver there. I would say that agents have become very creative during the pandemic with this tight inventory. So a buyer may actually have that home inspection being conducted, it's just not necessarily at a contract contingent home inspection that's happening. So they may be going in as a different part of that transaction. The other factor here that I want to say is that we do see that 14% of the market are non-primary residence buyers. So a vacation buyer or a small mom and pop investor. If we look at this data back in January of this year, what we saw is that 22% of the market were actually purchasing a non-primary residence home. Now, if we look back to that time period, I think it's really important to note that we had the lowest inventory we've actually ever recorded dating back to 1999 in January of this year. We slowly, incrementally have been adding more inventory to the market, but I will say that during that time period in January, all of the headlines were talking about the lack of inventory. So that was an ideal time for investors to come in and say, wait a second, if there's no inventory, I can buy a rental property. Maybe that's a short-term rental property, maybe that's a long-term rental property, but this is an opportunity for me. We also know during that time period, if we think back to January, there were still COVID lockdowns where if you traveled out of the country, you had to have a negative test to be able to come back. And to do that, a lot of families said, wait a second, I'm not gonna go on my international trip. I haven't gone on one in the last couple of years. I'm gonna buy a vacation property. And so they jumped into that market as well. And so perhaps purchasing a home that they could drive to on a long weekend as opposed to jumping on a flight and dealing with that as well. So I think this is an interesting market where we are seeing fewer investors coming in and vacation home buyers back down towards the historical norm, but you can see there's a lot of volatility in that number as well. It does bounce around quite a bit. What becomes really important, and I really want to drive home here, is that we just don't see distressed sales in this marketplace. I am seeing a lot of TikTok videos, a lot of reels, a lot of headlines that are making that comparison to 2008. But we have to remember that homeowners have equity. We've done reports on this, and we can actually see within your local market that the typical homeowner has built more than $100,000 in equity just in the last 5 years. And a lot of that has to do with the equity in the last 2 years because we have seen home price gains so steep. When we think about the distressed sales in the marketplace, back in 2008, half of realtors had worked with a client who had a distressed sale in the last month. And that's a very depressing time if we think about that. And if you were working in the marketplace, you know, just looking around, what a depressing time period that was. Today, it's 1%. I also heard this term recently, and I've said it a couple of times, and I think it's an interesting term. It's distressed with equity. That's not necessarily a short sale foreclosure, if we think of that. So these home sellers actually do have equity in their home, and they're selling it with equity in their home. So not a true foreclosure, not a true short sale. if someone had something in their life that happened that would put them into that marketplace, like a job loss or death in the family, what we know is that homeowners have so much wealth that they have built within their home that they're likely not going to be in the square housing market. So that's something really to drive home to potential home buyers and renters who are currently nervous about this housing market is the wealth gains that owners have had in the last couple of years. And we have local market data on that as well. So everyone wants to know what's coming next. I will say that it is hard to predict right now. I was on a panel last week with 2 other economists, and everyone on that panel shrugged and said, I don't know if we're in a recession, because we don't know. If this is a recession that we are currently in, it's a very, very unusual one, as our chief economist, Dr. Lautz, says. And the reason why I say that is we continue to have job gains and we continue to have consumer spending. Consumers are quite happy right now to go out and buy new goods, even as inflationary pressure is going up. So this is one of the very unusual things that we are seeing in this marketplace right now. We are still seeing job gains as well on a monthly basis that seem to be defying expectations that a lot of economists have. So when we have had negative GDP growth, it's not necessarily because that demand is not there from consumers. What I will say, and what I think is really important to hit down at this point, is that we are in a new housing paradigm. And there's 3 reasons why. This cannot really be compared to a past market that we have been in before. The first one is tight lending. We have incredibly tight housing lending right now. We don't have subprime lending. We don't have balloon loans and no doc loans. Those are just not available in today's marketplace. For a consumer today to obtain a mortgage, they really have to have a higher credit score. They have to have a higher income to be able to meet that mortgage payment, or they're not going to be approved for a loan. I remember back in that time period of the boom period back in 2005, I had friends who were working in nonprofits. They were making under $20,000 a year, being qualified for loans that were like $850. That they did not do that, but that's, I think, horrifying to folks out there if we think about today's lending standards. That's just not happening. The second one is low inventory. We are underbuilding, and estimates that we have from a report that we commissioned by the Rosen Group last year at Berkeley show that we're short by 4.5 to 6.5 million homes. So spot on the 5 million homes that Lauren said, it's right smack dab in the middle. And we do continue to see a delay in housing starts. So we'll see housing starts go up on a monthly basis, there's volatility in that numbers, and then we'll see them go down. I will say that last year we consistently saw housing starts go up, but it does not mean housing completes. We actually have seen builders continue to have delays in putting product on the market for a home, for a family to move in. And what we do know is that they're having struggles, the same struggles that we're all having, going to the grocery store or going to Target and trying to find something and it's just not there. They're having all of those problems with building supplies as well. They're not alone in that, as well as skilled labor and finding those skilled plumbers and electricians to be able to build those homes. The third one are demographics. I'm going to show you some data here, but I really just want to state from the offset is that we are seeing that household formation is there. Young adults want to move into their new properties. They want to live outside of their parents' home. And we are seeing that there is the biggest wave of young adults at the exact same time where we have underbuilding for 15 years. And that is really crunching inventory. And the last one on demographics is that we are seeing that people are living in homes longer. They're living for a longer period of time. They're healthy for a longer period of time. And they're aging in place. They're not saying that their American dream is to go and move into a nursing home. And because of that, that's crunching housing inventory as well. All of that being said, Lawrence's estimation for the next 18 months or so is a contraction in real estate activity. But I want to show you this chart and just show the comparisons here. Because if we see the green in the last 2 years, we can see that that's really out of pace with what we had seen in the trajectory really 2015 to 2019, where we see more normal activity. We still had low housing inventory in the last couple of years in 2018 and 2019, but it wasn't met with that frenzy pace of a lot of people coming into the buying market and just not enough inventory there. So what we do expect for the next 18 months is because of the rise in interest rates, there will be a contraction in activity, but it's back down